You think standing firm requires force. It does not. It requires refusing the judgment that pressure must be answered with pressure. You say you want stability, yet you escalate at the first sign of resistance. That contradiction is not imposed from outside. It is chosen. The disturbance does not begin when someone challenges you. It begins when you interpret that challenge as something that must be met with intensity, defense, or retaliation. The moment you agree with that impression, escalation is already underway, internally first, externally second. The event is simple: someone pushes, questions, resists, or disrespects. The addition is yours: I must push back harder. That is not necessity. That is judgment. And once that judgment is accepted, your response becomes predictable, not deliberate. Standing firm is not about increasing force. It is about removing false conclusions. You do not lose strength by refusing escalation, you recover control over where strength is actually applied. Examine the judgment before you defend the position. You confuse firmness with control over others. That is the first error. What is yours is not their reaction, not their tone, not their agreement, not their resistance. What is yours is narrower: judgment, assent, response. When you escalate, you are not strengthening your position. You are expanding your claim beyond its boundary. You move from "I will stand by my judgment" to "I must make them yield." That shift is subtle, but it is decisive. Because the second demand depends on what is not yours. You can hold a position without controlling its reception. That is the distinction. Most miss it. They treat disagreement as a threat to be neutralized. They treat opposition as something to defeat. But opposition belongs to the other person's faculty. It is not under your command. And when you attempt to command it, frustration follows, not because resistance is abnormal, but because your claim was misplaced from the start. The mind does not notice this expansion immediately. It feels justified. It feels like defense. But examine it closely. The moment agitation appears, the boundary has already been crossed. You are no longer operating within what is yours. You are attempting to govern what is not. Standing firm requires precision, not force. Precision means you remain within your domain. You clarify your judgment. You express it if needed. You act according to it. But you do not extend your authority into the other person's response. That extension is the seed of escalation. You say, "But if I don't push harder, I will be overrun." That belief is another error. Being overruled externally is not the same as being overturned internally. You lose nothing essential when someone disagrees with you. You lose only when your judgment becomes dependent on their reaction. Firmness is internal consistency, not external dominance. Consider what actually belongs to you in a moment of pressure. The impression arrives: they are challenging me. That is not yet a problem. The problem begins when the mind adds, "This must be stopped. I must assert harder." That addition is not forced. It is chosen. And once accepted, your action follows it automatically. Remove the addition, and the situation changes. The challenge remains. But the demand to overpower it disappears. You can respond without escalation. You can speak without intensifying. You can remain stable without converting disagreement into conflict. This is not passivity. It is accuracy. You are not withdrawing from the situation. You are withdrawing from false ownership within it. The failure to distinguish these domains creates unnecessary struggle. You argue longer than needed. You harden your tone. You push beyond the point of clarity into the territory of force. Not because the situation requires it, but because your judgment has already committed you to escalation. Correct the boundary, and much of what you call conflict dissolves. Not because others change, but because you stop trying to govern what was never yours. Hold your position. Release your claim over their response. You treat the first appearance as a conclusion. That is where escalation begins. Not outside. Inside. An impression arrives. It is immediate. They are disrespecting me. Or, they are trying to override me. That impression carries force. It feels complete. But it is not yet judgment. It is only an appearance. A presentation. The mind receives it before it examines it. The error is speed. The mind does not pause. It does not test. It does not ask, what is actually being presented? Instead, it moves directly to agreement. Assent is given almost at once. Quietly. Automatically. Without inspection. Once assent is given, the impression becomes a belief. No longer, it appears they are disrespecting me. Now, they are disrespecting me. The difference is small in language. It is decisive in structure. Because once belief is formed, response organizes itself around it. Now escalation feels justified. Even necessary. You are no longer reacting to uncertainty. You are acting on a conclusion you have already accepted. The pressure you feel is not from the event. It is from the endorsed interpretation. This is the hinge. Impression is not the problem. Assent is. Without assent, the impression remains open. It does not command action. It does not demand escalation. It is simply present, waiting for examination. But once assent occurs, the space for examination collapses. Action becomes immediate. Reaction becomes inevitable. You say, I had no choice. I had to respond. But that is not accurate. What you mean is, I agreed too quickly. The sense of necessity is produced after assent, not before. It is the effect of endorsement, not the cause of action. Notice the sequence. It is always the same. Impression appears. Interpretation forms. Assent is given. Reaction follows. If you examine only the reaction, you miss the origin. If you try to control the reaction without addressing assent, you are working too late in the chain. By that point, the structure is already set. Escalation is not a strategy you consciously select in the moment. It is the natural outcome of unexamined assent. When the mind agrees that something must be countered, corrected, or resisted with force, the body and speech follow that agreement without delay. So the work is earlier. Not at the level of behavior. At the level of agreement. Between impression and assent, there is a gap. It is brief. Often unnoticed. But it exists. And within that gap lies the only place where escalation can be prevented without suppression. You do not need to deny the impression. You do not need to pretend it is pleasant. You only need to refuse immediate agreement. To hold the impression as an appearance, not a verdict. This does not weaken you. It restores choice. If you can delay assent, even slightly, the chain is interrupted. Interpretation loosens. Reaction slows. The demand to escalate loses its urgency. You can then respond from examination, not compulsion. Most never practice this. They focus on outcomes. On winning. On being heard. But the decisive moment is earlier than all of that. It is silent. Internal. Almost invisible. The moment you agree, the path is set. The moment you refuse agreement, the path remains open. Escalation is not forced upon you. It is permitted by you. You believe discipline means holding yourself back in the moment. It does not. By the time the moment arrives, the structure is already in motion. Discipline is not what you do when pressure peaks. It is what you have trained before pressure appears. If the mind has not been trained to examine impressions, it will not suddenly begin under tension. It will follow its habit. And habit, when untrained, moves quickly toward assent. You do not escalate because you lack control in the moment. You escalate because the mind has been conditioned to agree without delay. That conditioning is repeated daily. Every small, unexamined agreement reinforces it. Every time an impression is treated as truth, the pattern strengthens. So when a stronger impression arrives, challenge, disagreement, resistance, the response is not new. It is practiced. The escalation feels immediate because it has been rehearsed in smaller forms. This is why effort alone fails. You attempt to resist escalation only when it becomes visible. But visibility is late. By then, assent has already been given. The reaction is already unfolding. What you call losing control is often the execution of a pattern you have already accepted many times before. Discipline corrects this at its root. Not by suppression. Not by force. By repetition of examination. You train yourself to see impressions as incomplete. You train yourself to delay agreement. You train yourself to question what appears urgent. This is not a dramatic act. It is small, repeated, quiet, but it alters the structure over time. Without this training, you rely on willpower. And willpower is unstable. It fluctuates with fatigue, mood, and context. It fails precisely when pressure increases. That is why escalation returns, even when you intend otherwise. Discipline is more reliable because it does not depend on intensity. It depends on familiarity. The mind becomes accustomed to pausing, to not immediately agreeing, to holding the impression at a distance. This distance is not emotional withdrawal. It is structural clarity. You are not denying what appears. You are refusing to convert appearance into command. Many mistake discipline for rigidity. They think it requires tightening, resisting, forcing restraint. But that is still reaction. It is still governed by the same urgency, only redirected inward. Stoic discipline is different. It reduces urgency itself. Not by ignoring the situation, but by removing the false belief that immediate agreement is required. You see the impression. You recognize its force. But you do not submit to it. Not yet. This not yet is the entire practice. It is brief, often unnoticed, but it is where the structure changes. If you repeat this consistently, the mind begins to reorganize. Impressions lose their authority. They still appear, but they no longer carry automatic endorsement. Reaction slows. Not artificially. Naturally. At that point, standing firm becomes possible without escalation. Because firmness no longer depends on intensity. It depends on clarity. You do not need to push harder. You need to agree less quickly. This is why discipline cannot be improvised. It must be built. In ordinary moments. In small interactions. In situations that do not seem important. Because those are the repetitions that define how the mind will respond when pressure increases. If you ignore those moments, you train the opposite. You train immediate assent. And when it matters, the mind follows that training without hesitation. So the question is not whether you can remain calm under pressure. The question is whether you have practiced not agreeing before pressure arrives. Discipline is not the control of behavior. It is the training of assent. You do not need a new principle. You need a repeatable interruption. When the impression arrives, do not trust its urgency. That is the first action. Not emotional restraint. Not silence. Recognition. The appearance comes with pressure attached. It insists, respond now. That insistence is part of the impression. Not a command you must obey. So the first move is simple. Name it as appearance. Not truth. Not conclusion. Appearance. This is how it appears. Not, this is what it is. That distinction is operational. It creates distance. Without distance, assent is immediate. With distance, examination becomes possible. Then delay. Briefly. Not dramatically. Not as performance. A short refusal to agree. You are not deciding yet. You are holding the impression in suspension. This is where most fail. They believe delay means weakness. They believe immediate response proves strength. But immediate response often reveals unexamined agreement. Delay reveals control over assent. After the pause, test the interpretation. Not the event. The interpretation. What exactly are you adding? Are you adding intention? They are trying to undermine me. Are you adding evaluation? This is unacceptable. Are you adding necessity? I must push back harder. Each addition must be separated from the original impression. Because each one is optional. None are forced. If you do not separate them, they merge. And once merged, they feel like a single reality. That is when escalation feels justified. So you isolate. Event. Then addition. What was said. Then what you think it means. What happened. Then what you believe must follow. This separation slows the chain. It weakens automatic assent. It exposes where escalation is being constructed. Now decide your response based on what is yours. Not their tone. Not their reaction. Not the outcome. Only your judgment. Your expression. Your action. You may still speak. You may still disagree. You may still hold your position. But the tone changes. Not because you are softening. Because you are no longer acting from a false conclusion. You do not raise intensity to prove firmness. You remove distortion to preserve it. If agitation has already begun, the process does not disappear. It becomes correction instead of prevention. You notice the escalation in motion. You trace it backward. You identify the point where assent occurred. You revise it. Not by denial. By correction. This is not what I first took it to be. That statement weakens the structure. Not instantly. But reliably. Then you adjust your response. Even mid-action. Even after speaking. Correction is not limited to the beginning. It can occur at any point before full commitment. Daily practice makes this usable. In minor interactions, you apply the same sequence. Appearance. Pause. Separation. Examination. Response. You do it when the stakes feel low. Because that is where repetition is easiest. And repetition is what builds stability. If you wait for high-pressure situations, you will default to habit. Not because you choose it. Because you trained it. So you train differently. You treat every impression as incomplete. You treat urgency as suspect. You treat interpretation as optional. You treat response as deliberate. This is not a technique you use occasionally. It is a structure you maintain. When practiced, escalation loses its foundation. Not because conflict disappears. But because the mind stops supplying it with agreement. You expect freedom to feel like ease. It does not. It feels like restraint applied at the correct point. Freedom is not the absence of pressure. Pressure remains. Others still disagree. They still challenge. They still resist. Nothing external becomes more obedient. What changes is the location of authority. Before correction, authority is scattered. It moves outward. It attaches to reaction, tone, outcome, recognition. You feel pulled. You respond quickly. You defend, intensify, escalate. Not because you chose carefully, but because you already agreed with the impression that demanded it. After correction, authority returns inward. Not completely. Not permanently. But more often. More reliably. The ruling faculty is less easily captured. Impressions still arrive. Some still carry force. But they do not command automatic submission. This is freedom. Not comfort. Not calm as a guarantee. Freedom is the reduced likelihood of unexamined assent. You do not become immune to agitation. You become less obedient to it. That distinction matters. Because many seek a state where disturbance disappears. That is not available. What is available is a change in relationship to disturbance. It appears. It pressures, but it does not immediately dictate action. You remain capable of firmness, but the nature of that firmness changes. It is no longer loud, no longer reactive, no longer dependent on winning or overcoming. It becomes stable. You can hold a position without increasing intensity. You can speak without needing to overpower. You can remain consistent without converting disagreement into conflict. This does not make interactions easier. It makes them clearer. You see where the tension actually originates. Not in the other person's behavior. In your own prior agreement. Because of that, you no longer treat every challenge as something to resolve externally. Many do not require resolution. They require non-agreement internally. When you stop supplying assent to escalation, escalation weakens. Not always visibly. Not immediately. But structurally. You may still be misunderstood. You may still be opposed. You may still be dismissed. These remain outside your control. And they do not determine whether you have remained firm. Firmness is measured by internal consistency, not external compliance. If you require the other person to change in order to feel stable, your position was never secure. It depended on what was not yours. If you can remain aligned with your judgment regardless of their reaction, you have shifted the foundation. This does not end conflict. It changes your participation in it. You no longer escalate to preserve position. You maintain position without escalation. That is a quieter form of strength, but more durable. It does not depend on volume, or force, or outcome. It depends on whether you continue to examine what appears before you agree to it. Freedom, then, is not a state you reach and keep. It is a condition you maintain through repeated correction. Each impression tests it. Each moment of pressure invites surrender. And each refusal to agree blindly restores it. There is no final arrival. Only continued governance. If you stop examining, the old pattern returns. Quickly. Without warning. Because the mind defaults to what it has practiced most. So the task remains ongoing. Not to eliminate pressure. Not to control others. Not to secure outcomes. To govern assent. That is the only place where freedom exists. And the only place where firmness can remain without escalation. You began with a contradiction. You claimed to want stability, yet you agreed too quickly with impressions that demanded escalation. That contradiction was not imposed by others. It was maintained by your own assent. The correction has been consistent. The event is not the source of disorder. The interpretation is. The impression is not yet binding. The moment it becomes binding is the moment you agree with it. Standing firm does not require force. It requires accuracy. Accuracy about what belongs to you. Accuracy about what does not. Your judgment is yours. Your response is yours. The reaction of others is not. When you confuse these domains, escalation becomes inevitable. You attempt to control what lies outside your authority. You treat resistance as something to eliminate rather than something to face without surrender. But when the boundary is clear, the mechanism is visible, and assent is trained, the structure changes. You no longer need escalation to maintain position. You no longer require intensity to confirm strength. What remains is simpler. More exact. You examine what appears. You refuse immediate agreement. You respond from judgment, not from pressure. Nothing external has been stabilized. Others remain as they are. Situations remain uncertain. Outcomes remain outside your command. But your relation to them changes. And that is the only place where stability can exist. Return to what is yours to govern.